I think we're all ready. Good morning, everybody. The warm-up act is about to start. So here we go. We certainly have an awful lot of serious global business to talk about today. But before we delve into that, I'd like to start with a couple of less troubling issues. The most compelling fact I've learned in the 18 months I've served as chairman is that we have terrific, and I mean terrific, people working for us here at the MTA. From the people who run our trains, buses, bridges, and tunnels, to those who support them, we are certainly very, very blessed. We have people who work hard every single day to try to get their arms around sometimes absolutely insurmountable issues. And mostly they do that without any fanfare or recognition. Unfortunately, we get caught up into the day-to-day business and sometimes hold that recognition for the end of their career with us. And today, perhaps, is no exception. I want to pause and thank an individual who has toiled long and hard and diligently on our behalf and on behalf of our customers, the taxpayers, and the citizens of the entire region. He has decided to retire after nearly 3.5 decades of service. Absolutely amazing. He is someone who both literally and symbolically has been the pillar of the MTA, our longtime director of real estate, Rocco Krusilik. Rocco's work has largely been behind the scenes, but his integrity and his abilities have always been front and center. He has enabled millions upon millions of New Yorkers who will never ever know him to travel more efficiently and effectively and for generations to come. Rocco leaves behind a legacy of success and many heavy hearts here at the MTA. We wish him Godspeed in his future endeavors. And Rocco, I'd like you to come up here and join me and Lee, and we'd like to present you with a resolution that reflects the sentiment of the board on your 3.5 decades of service. Come on up, Rocco.
I need to read this. So
yeah,
I need a mic. So, Rocco, I'm going to read this using the mic. Whereas Rocco Krusilik has had a career spanning more than 35 years, and whereas he has served as a civil engineer for nearly 12 years at MTA New York City Transit, working on infrastructure replacement and rehabilitation, and whereas he used his immeasurable talents for 15 years to lead and build MTA's real estate operations into one that elicits national recognition. And whereas he has been diligent in capitalizing on the value of MTA assets, including more than 4,000 retail leases, leading an effort to maximize real estate revenue, and whereas he has adopted the use of new media, including video and subway wraps, as part of an effort to increase advertising revenue, which has risen more than tenfold during his tenure. And whereas his creativity and hard work during the extensive negotiations to secure assets needed for MTA's mega projects have been crucial to their success. Therefore, be it resolved that the Board of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority and its subsidiaries and affiliates extends its deepest gratitude and sincere congratulations to Rocco Krusilik on the occasion of his retirement. Congratulations.
It's been an honor and a privilege to have worked in this great city, for this great organization, this great state, and this great country. As I often state to most of you know I am not an American born. I am an American by choice. It's a great country to be in, and I'm proud every day of it. I thank you very much. What I accomplished was done as part of a team. I have had a great staff, have a great staff, and I hope that they will continue to perform for this great organization. I sincerely thank all of you very much. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Get your pencils and papers out, guys. I want to talk about a misperception that's out there and keeps coming back and biting us, that the MTA needs more oversight. What is not widely reported is that literally dozens of entities oversee, audit, critique every aspect of MTA's operations. I don't want to bore you with the long list of entities that do this important work, but I will touch on one element of that oversight today. Since the mid-1980s, in accordance with statutory requirements and good business practice, we've engaged an independent engineering consultant, IEC, to monitor, review, evaluate projects of our capital program. The IEC provides us with a second opinion on just about everything we do and ensures we are doing it as efficiently as possible. For the last 7 years, the IEC has been Carter Burgess, a company that did an absolutely terrific job. As a tradition and as a caution, we change the IEC every few years in order to provide a fresh perspective on our operations. As of April 1st, we have brought on a new joint venture to serve the IEC role. McKissick and Declan bring to the MTA a combination of local, national, and international expertise in the transportation industry. The McKissick and Declan team includes individuals with prior experience with the MTA, Amtrak, as well as in Denver, Los Angeles, Canada, Europe, Asia, in other words, all over the world. McKissick, the oldest minority and woman-owned program management firm in the country, is headquartered in the U.S. and has offices, headquartered in New York City, and has offices throughout the U.S. Declan, which operates from Washington, provides engineering services to clients in North America and throughout the world. This team is led by Michael Cadella and Joe DeVito, native New Yorkers, with local transportation experience, supported by many other capable engineers, including one of the world's foremost experts in signals and communication. Will those members of the McKissick and Declan team here today please stand and be recognized? Everybody see them?
It's still team.
Good?
Still team.
All right, good, definitely. Hi, guys. I invite all the board members to join us at CPOC to better get to know this team and the resources that they offer. Now on to some more sobering, or maybe the most sobering elements of today's agenda. It begs the measure of credulity that we find ourselves in the situation we are in today. Nearly 10 months after we begun to lay out the financial challenges that face us today. We did that very publicly in our July financial plan. And we did it again this fall. And we did it again in December when we adopted a balanced but painful budget. And we did it again when we held 9 public hearings earlier this year throughout the region to talk about the draconian measures it would take and require to solve our dilemma. And we did it again in our February and March board cycles. The past 10 months have been very painful for many of us here at this board table. but we saw they clearly were just as painful, or in many more instances, more painful for our customers and supporters as we traveled throughout the MTA service region. And the extent of the pain was made very clear to those in Albany when many of you around this table trekked up there together to speak to anyone, let me say this again, to any legislator who would listen to us. We were very successful at telling our credible and compelling story to some of our most skeptical audiences, the media. They actually, many of you here today have understood very clearly the seriousness and urgency at hand, perhaps better than the people in Albany. We've gone from month to month, to week, to day, living in the hope that a solution will be crafted to avert the type of pain we have been contemplating. The fact is that the time for action has come, and as of today, gone. At this point, there is no tomorrow. There's no next week. There's no next month to fall back on. That's a lot of no's. But there's one more. There is clearly no sense of urgency north of here that as of the latest chapter of the story and saga got pushed to next week. And why? Well, quite bizarrely, it's primarily based on the last-minute amendment that for all intents and purposes duplicate what we already do in accordance with existing law. We have an independent auditor look at our books. Well, if anyone has bothered to look at the annual report, that's this thing that we ship up every year, and here it is, right in my hand. They've seen for the full will have seen that a full half of the report is an independent auditor's report. Here's the latest one. We just went through the audit committee. This is the last one, and this is the newest one. And if anybody out there wants a copy, we got lots of copies. Some people say I ought to send it to all the legislators up in Albany because it costs too much. And anyway, sorry. And by the way, all our annual reports and all those audits have been posted. Listen to this, posted on our website for years. It's not new. Our books have been open for years to anyone who bothers to look. We have been saying over and over again, and there's a court case to prove it, that we do not keep two separate books. And the idea and the thought that something goes on with staff that the board doesn't know about is absolutely and positively ludicrous. The people around this table, the people on the audit committee, the finance committee, and the board as a whole actually read this stuff. They go through it page by page. They pick up errors. This is not fooling around. These audits are not here for somebody's fun, and the idea that the legislature thinks that we don't do it is absolutely absurd. Makes me a little grumpy. Anyway, as of today, this is the moment of truth. While others fail to meet their obligations to the public, this board is nonetheless committed to live up to its obligation to act. And painful though it may be, we will do it to the best interest of our customers and employees. Listen to this again. We will do whatever's necessary for what's best for our club customers and employees. We are not a political body. We have terms. That's why it's set up this way. So we do it the best we can for the people who we serve. And that leads me to one more last point. And before I turn over the agenda to the public speaking session and to our Executive Director, Lee, and to walk us through the details ahead, I want to talk just for a moment to all our employees, both represented and non-represented. Some of you, no, I think actually all of you, will be affected either directly or indirectly by the actions we are being forced to take. But I want to ask you, I plead with you to try to understand that this board is not at odds with any of you, despite what you may read or hear. We are not at odds with anyone. The management team is also not at odds with any of you. Rather, we are challenged with a mission of providing New York with the best and most effective service that the available resources will allow. and we are mandated by law to adopt and implement a balanced budget every year. We don't have a choice about that. We must do that. And as we stand here at the threshold, I ask you that we work together, not only to deliver what today's resources will allow, but also in the future to provide what this great city, this great region, and this great state need, and requires to remain the financial and economic capital of the world. Okay, you've all heard enough from me. Doug, let's get on with the speakers.
Yes, sir. We have 6 public speakers: Andriva Pinder, Tony Murphy, Marty Goodman, Frank Austin, Matthew Shotkin, and David Kupferberg. If you would all please assemble near the podium in that order. Andriva Pinder. I'm sorry. We're talking about 2 minutes here, so all right, if it means that much to you, Marty. If everyone else will please line up in the order in which I call their names. And let's get started with the public speaking. Sir, please. Can we have a speaker? Andriva Pinder, TWU.
Okay, well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here with the TWU. I'm here on behalf of New York City Transit, actually, because New York City Transit is its employees. You sit here, you say you care about the employees, you care about the public, yet you are cutting service. I'm sure at some time when you had a mission statement, part of your mission was to provide a safe system for your riders to ride in, a clean system. But here you are cutting service, closing booths. There are 468 stations in the system, thousands of miles of track, okay, over 600 booths. But you're closing these booths and imperiling your passengers. That's not providing service. You're limiting access by closing all these booths. You plan to close over 200. Have you given any thought to how many people will be affected by 200 booths closing? How many people will not get service? How many people, your elderly and handicapped people, the imposition you're putting on them because you're closing these booths, you're closing these stations? I just got a list last week with a meeting with management where they're closing 6 stations at night. Of course, you announced this when you did your public hearings. But people go to work. Maybe these stations you consider them not very well used. People go to work at night. So to even say, oh, it's overnight, so we'll close it, that's ridiculous. And you mismanage the system, and now you want the public and your employees to pay for that mismanagement. Okay? I see I only have 6 seconds. I had a lot more to say, but I have to honor this clock, I presume.
Yes, please. Thank you. Our next speaker, Tony Murphy, followed by Marty Goodman.
I'm here, my name is Tony Murphy. I'm here with the Bail Out the People movement. We've sponsored a series of demonstrations against fare hikes. Over the last few months, there have been many demonstrations, one last night at Union Square. I'm here to really not to address this non-elected panel of bankers and billionaires, but to let people know who came to this hearing and also who are watching today on New York One or wherever this is being televised, that there will be another great big demonstration this Friday. It's May Day. This is a workers' holiday. It's being celebrated by billions of people around the world. The bankers have their billions, so do we. And we would like to invite anybody who wants to come and protest the outrage of these fare hikes, service cuts, and layoffs. This Friday, noon, gathering at noon, marching at 5:30. So if you are off that day, you can come any time during the afternoon. If you have to work, you can come at 5:30. and we would be marching to protest the outrages that are going on, which include bailouts of banks rather than people. And I would also like to address what's going on here today, because it's today in the Daily News they announced that the first of the layoffs are happening with the transit workers. 600 names were given to the union. Service cuts are already happening. It's clear that the MTA Board is not waiting for the democratic process to take place before it goes ahead with shoving its debt crisis onto the backs of the riders and the people who operate the system. And today, a standing ovation was given to one of the MTA Board members as he walked out the door, while today in the Daily News it was announced that the first of 3,000 layoffs are happening amongst the transit workers. It goes without saying that those transit workers will not be given a standing ovation by this board, and would be obscene if they did. And nothing that I could say could more dramatize the fact that this board cares more about the banks and real estate interests than it does about the riders and the people who operate this system and the people it's really supposed to represent.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Our next speaker, Marty Goodman, followed by Frank Austin, Matthew Shotkin, and David Kupferberg. Mr. Goodman.
Marty Goodman, station agent. Thank you. I'll be at that May Day demonstration. It's also for immigrant rights, who will be slammed by these fare hikes that you want to shove down everybody's throats. I would like to first say that congratulations again to the Democratic Party for really fighting against fare hikes. We've got a coalition now around the Ravitch Commission and its recommendations, 8% fare hike instead of 23 or 30% fare hike. If you guys said 50% fare hike, they would be maybe for a 30% fare hike. I am against all fare hikes. This is going to pay the banks, to pay the tax-free bonds that are owned by the banks and rich loafers on Park Avenue. I say if you are going to lay us off, we are going to shut you down. There are plenty of angry transit workers that would be willing to go the limit to stop layoffs and not see their brothers and sisters' lives and families be destroyed by you people. Now, I'd like to bring to people's attention the new bond issue that the MTA is going to be releasing. $750 million in Build America bonds, high-yield bonds that are going to be released, I believe, next November. The payout on that's going to be $50 million to guys who sit around and don't do anything. More money to Wall Street. These are the people that working people hate. They hate the giveaway. They hate what the bailout's all about. They hate the bonuses. But you people are going to treat them to $50 million in high-yield bonds. And I say, resign if you don't like layoffs. Resign if you don't like fare hikes. Put your money where your mouth is. MTA Board, go on strike. Do not permit this to happen. Resign now. This is all about the banks. Cancel the debt. Hell no to layoffs. No to all fare hikes. No means no.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Our next speaker, Frank Austin. Frank Austin. And Matthew Shotkin, David Kupferberg.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Frank Austin. I'm a TW Local 100 Division Chair that represents over 1,800 or more bus operators in the Bronx. Late yesterday, Local 100 received notice formally about plans to lay off over 600 bus operators in the Department of Buses in the Bronx as of July 1st. We strongly oppose this action and will fight in every way possible. The threatened layoffs would mean jeopardizing the security and futures of hundreds of our employees and families. The threatened layoffs would mean service cuts and disruption to tens and thousands of our customers. They are just plain wrong. I would like to give the board a simple message. You cannot do this to our families. You cannot do this to our riders. You need to get off your hands and find the money. You are not balancing your budgets on our backs. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Matthew Shucken. Matthew Shucken.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. And as I previously stated, when you walked in the room, your tie is very nice. Yours too, Andrew. According to an April 17th Daily News article, it's both a good and a bad idea to implement the subway Easy Pass. It's a good idea because it's easier for commuters to use. They can use it for 2 years, and they don't have to stand in line at the token booth. On the other hand, it's a bad idea because it enables, as we've seen before, MTA employees to ride for free on the subway, even though they do not ride them very often. At least some of them don't. I want the MTA board to be very frugal using these, please. You'll remember that Mr. X made comments about the fact that he hated the regular Easy Pass at one of the last board meetings. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Shucken. Our last speaker today, David Kupferberg.
Good morning. I wonder if any of you here on the MTA board ever actually thought of a simple idea. Just simply have the state assume your debt, finished. But at the same time, ban you and all public authorities from issuing any more debt service except for an act of legislature. Something to think about. Another thing I'm here about is about the 50th Street fan plant that in total will pursue eminent domain procedures for a cost of $25 million. Instead of using the deep cavern alternative, which is costing about $1 billion, just use existing facilities, the upper level loop. Simple. Better, instead of an environmental assessment, I use something better. Common sense. Simple as that. Another thing I want you to talk about is for the outside chance that you should the AABB resolution you adopted during past few board meetings be repealed, the TA will use the pedestrianization of Broadway in order to eliminate a bus route, the M6, and without a public hearing. This past Sunday, George Haikalis, a member of Manhattan Community Board 2's Traffic and Transportation Committee, said to me that he was furious that the TA released a proposal with zero community input and that the proposal shows the TA service plan is total thoughtlessness and total insensitivity to the riding public. But they're not to blame. Former TA President Reuter gutted operations planning and demoralized those who remained.
Please conclude, Mr. Kupferberg.
I have a suggestion. Keep the northbound M6 as is, northbound, but operate southbound via 7th. Next step is to reroute the M20 southbound via 9th. Their promise of more reliable service uptown will trickle to downtown is hollow because 6th Avenue, after all, runs northbound.
Please conclude, Mr. Kupferberg.
TA President Howard Roberts Jr. and I have much in common. We want to reverse the policies of his predecessor, to restore the internal and external discourse, to allow the service planners to become the free thinkers they deserve to be. To prevent the elimination of M6 and endorse my counter proposal is the best way in order for him to achieve his goals. Thank you very much.
And that concludes today's public speaking.
Thank you very much, Doug. I need approval of the minutes, please. The minutes of March 13th special board meeting. Oh, great. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay. Now a report from our executive director. I also have to say, also the minutes of March 25th, just to make, didn't let me get that out fast enough. Anybody opposed to that? Okay. Both? Okay. Am I okay?
I move that
second.
25 minutes be adopted.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, so moved. Okay, Jim? All right. Now, Lee, you're on.
Okay. Good morning. As the chairman mentioned, we received more difficult fiscal news this week that should be put in context before we move forward. Last November, we predicted a $1.2 billion budget gap for 2009. In response, the board approved 25 to 30% fare increases and severe service reductions. But despite those actions, the global economic recession has not let up. The budget that was passed in December assumed large decreases in revenue, but we now know that the reality is even worse. On Monday, we presented reforecasts of our major revenue sources. Real estate taxes are down $336 million compared with what we projected in the budget the board approved in December. Fare box and toll revenues are down $221 million. State dedicated taxes are down $113 million. The result of the continued weakening in these revenues is that our budget deficit, which we so painfully had to close with the worst service cuts and fare increases in recent memory, has grown by another $621 million. Barring assistance from Albany, we will have to take additional actions to balance our budget over and above the service cuts and fare increases that are going into effect even as we speak. Shortly, Gary DeLaverson will walk us through the process for closing these gaps. It is clear that we cannot close a $600 million gap in such a short period without doing irreparable harm to the MTA. Therefore, Gary will be describing a plan to amend MTA budgeting procedures to allow for an 18-month budget beginning in July. Even over this extended period, the measures that will be required to balance the budget will be extremely painful. As always, without Albany assistance, we can only cut expenses, which is largely service, and further increase fares. Next month, we will present this new 18-month budget for board approval, with additional actions included. The pain of the budget passed in December is already being felt. Yesterday, we were forced to send letters to union presidents beginning the process of laying off hardworking bus operators, maintainers, and subway service supervisors. This week, planned service to Belmont Racetrack will not begin. More impacts will be felt each week, with fare increases now barely a month away. In case it wasn't clear, all of this dire economic news further underscores the need for Albany to act to approve a funding package that provides stable, predictable revenue streams for the MTA. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Okay, now, Gary, you're up to bat. He will introduce the proposal regarding the MTA budgeting procedures as they relate to our present fiscal situation and the steps we will need to take to address them. Gary, get comfortable. Everybody comfortable? Have enough water?
Okay.
That's all we give out. We can't afford anything but water out of the
Keep
tap.
her mic off. So first of all, let me apologize for this being a walk-on. Obviously, it's a significant issue that should be presented in the normal course of business, but as you all know, we didn't lock the reforecast until over the weekend, and so the capacity to produce this document had to await that. So first of all, I apologize for the fact that we're doing this as a walk-on. As the board knows, our procedures for budget adoption and reporting are actually established in a set of rules that the board has adopted. You adopted in 2003 and subsequently modified in a couple of areas a year later. And subsequent to that, as a result of discussions that flowed out of the state controller, in fact OSDC's regulations that were implemented consistent with the state regulations that pertain to the MTA. So you have a set of board-adopted policies, which is how it is that we do our normal budgeting and reporting. And just to refresh everybody's recollection, that's a preliminary plan in July, a November proposed final budget, December adoption, and then February the enacted budget comes out. That's the normal process. We're all familiar with it. We've gone through it at great length many times, and the efficacy of that process shouldn't be understated, because it's very important, because it does give all of us and the public as well a long opportunity to consider the impact of proposed actions, as well as a good forward look at what it is that we're going to be confronting. And so, as I say, I don't want to make light of the fact that we're seeking your permission to amend that under the exigent circumstances that we currently confront. The document that you have in front of you, the staff summary, seeks to change that. And it seeks to change it in an important way, but I want to describe what it's changing and what it's not changing. It doesn't change our legal obligations under the statute, obviously. You don't have that authority, nor are we seeking that authority. It doesn't change our fiscal year for auditing and reporting purposes. It does change it seeks your approval to change the method by which we present to you and what it is that you would adopt, the methodology for gap closing, so for budget and financial planning purposes. The specifics of what it is that we are seeking your approval on, as Lee mentioned a moment ago, is to recognize on the one hand that the information that we presented to you on Monday presents a truly awesome challenge from a budgeting standpoint. So the billion-dollar frightening number in 2010, as well as the $600 million, slightly more, but the $600 million number that now exists to maintain balance in 2009, should be compared, I think, to the $1.2 billion that you all were confronted with closing over the course of the last year. We know how difficult that was, what that took in order to effectuate the actions necessary to close, some of which, obviously, many of which are still underway. And this is of a similar magnitude over a much, much, much tighter time period. As a result, then, what we're seeking is to address in the most methodical way possible in a constrained time period. And so I would describe it for you this way. The billion-dollar 10 problem can be solved in such a way, it will be as difficult as you can imagine right now, but it will be solved in such a way that its implementation elements can be advanced earlier than would be true under the normal budget process of July and November, right? By advancing a set of solutions to you to be proposed in May, next month, for your adoption in June, such that actions can commence sooner than under the normal circumstance. If the totality of those actions that we're required to take equal about $1 billion to solve 10 and are implemented at a time period earlier than what would be necessary just to solve 10, it will effectuate some measure, and I want to emphasize the word some measure of assistance towards the $600 million problem that has now developed during calendar 9. So, in summary, the process that we're seeking is to amend so that we present to you next month in May, and I want to say that although I'm comfortable that the work will be professional, it will be difficult to produce the amount of information that we need for your considered judgment in May, but it will be done. We're seeking your permission to produce in May a set of actions that we would seek your approval in June, quick turnaround in both cases, for effectuation, obviously, upon your approval after the June board. The document itself will presume enactment over time during the course of that 18 months in order to accomplish the two goals that I just described, solving the $1 billion for 10, accelerating some of those actions into 9 to allow for some reduction in the $600 million that has now opened up. By definition, following up on what Lee said a moment ago, by definition, it is staff's judgment that closing $600 million in the remaining part of this year is sort of strange credulity in the sense that it would take actions of such shock that it would be a mistake. You just would not want to advance it. That's just not the way you run an organization of this size and of this importance. And so that's why we're proposing something that's so out of the ordinary. This is a one-time proposal. It is a suggestion that we make this amendment for this process. Again, it doesn't change the fiscal year, and then we go back to our normal budgeting process after we accomplish these goals. Needless to say, all of this presumes what we all are, the expectations that we're all operating under right now, which is that we are on our own and continue on our own. If those conditions change, then as we had committed to the board in the past, we would come back at that point with a budget resolution to modify the existing budget to take into account whatever actions were enacted as a result of legislation enacted signed by the governor and enacted into law.
Describe the process, why we come to the board to make this amendment in our financial reporting structure.
Right. So we actually have to do it this way because of the fact that you have adopted policies, and the adopted policies are consistent with state controller regulations. We've had informal conversations with the state controller about this conversation that we anticipated having this morning. We have also talked to our auditors, our outside auditors, about these changes. To ensure that everyone has a comfort level with the change in the process. Again, I don't want to suggest that we're doing this lightly, but so it is to conform our internal actions for this time period with your existing board-approved policies, as well as to allow us to go back to OSDC and advise that the board has taken this step, and then we'll advance it from there.
Okay. This is an action item that requires board approval to amend on a temporary basis the budgeting and reporting requirements applicable to the MTA and all the operating agencies for the 2010 budget process. May I have a motion, please? Motion made. Any discussion? Jeff?
This is a pretty bold move. I think this is one that we're being faced to deal with. We have to deal with stuff very quickly. I think in everyone's mind, this isn't the best case scenario. The best case scenario is something would come through and we wouldn't have to make these changes. These changes put in a very short period of time, both for public consumption and our consumption, what we may have to do to balance the end of 2009 and 2010, and does so, rightfully so. I mean, it makes total sense that in order to get through 2009, you have to combine the two. Does so 6 months before 2010 starts, which has its own challenges and concerns. I raise them only that we as a board will have to balance that. I mean, that's the act. That's what we're taking today. We're balancing the act of making sure we have finances and stay in shape with that of these changes of the calendar bring its own concerns. With that said, it's something I think we have to do. I take solace in the fact that if something does happen in Albany, that we can possibly revisit this, so we don't have to take those actions. And as long as we are flexible enough as a board to have that, I think it's clearly the appropriate standard now. We have to take action, assuming we are on our own, and do that. This is not a light action. I'm only sort of sharing what Gary had already said. There are some issues here, but this is, I think, for now, the appropriate action, given that we are on our own.
Any other discussion?
Just a question.
Andrew?
This vote would just authorize the change in the period, the budget period. It wouldn't actually authorize any of the actions that you were speaking of earlier.
No, of course not. This is a process. This is a process resolution.
Process. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. In support of the proposed amendment to the process, I am voting in favor of it. However, it does beg the issue, and this should not be lost on the public at large, and certainly should not be lost on the legislature, because we're now getting into the question: is there transit life after the doomsday budget? We're about to entertain, as I know that everybody at this table recognizes, a whole series of cuts and revenue enhancement proposals that are going to go beyond draconian, since we've already been to draconian, so I guess it's draconian squared or some other horrible description of that. I'm saddened by the passing of John Markey this past week from Staten Island, the state senator who rose up with people of goodwill in the legislature from years gone by, back in the 70s, with Stanley Fink and Warren Anderson and Hugh Carey to rescue the city of New York. And in speaking about Senator Markey this week, it really dawned on me that we need a Senator Markey-like approach to this very real crisis that quite frankly, comes close to the fiscal crisis of the 70s for the 9 million riders of this system. And I saw that the mayor with the transit with the UFT president, Randy Weingarten, Catherine Wild, started to put some pressure on the legislature, some continuing pressure because they've been there before, on the legislature this week. And I would urge them and other folks, the transit union, other people who spoke here today, to recognize that this is not a Democratic problem, okay? And like Senator Markey and Stanley Fink, this is a legislative-driven problem that requires people to put their partisanship aside. And I think to a great extent, Senator Smith has gotten a bad rap and taking a lot of the burden for what, in some instances, I think were some pretty good ideas in terms of coming up with revenues to be resolved. And what's been missing from this debate is the other political party. At last count, there has been exactly 0 Republican votes for any of the plans that have been offered. And it can't be solved by Democrats alone, and it shouldn't be resolved by Democrats alone. This is a nonpartisan issue. It's vital to Democrats and Republicans, and the Republicans who represent the city and the Republicans who represent the suburbs and the rest of the state need to get engaged in this process because what's about to take place, the people of Staten Island are now looking at this number, $13 for tolls on the Verrazano Bridge. Okay, and they're hearing that people shouldn't have to pay tolls in other boroughs. Okay, quite frankly, they don't understand that as a concept why they should have to pay tolls and people in the other. Okay, but I'm not going to suggest that it has to be solved one way or another. What I'm saying is that everybody needs to be at the table, Democratic and Republican, to resolve this problem. Just like back in the days of John Markey and Hugh Carey and Stanley Fink and other men who rose to the challenge. Hopefully Senator Lanza from Staten Island and Marty Golden and Senator Padovan, who represent the city of New York, will get into this discussion, will help the 9 million users of this system bring some of their Republican colleagues from upstate along with them so that we can not have to go through what is going to be one of the ugliest processes you can imagine. If you think the 40 hours of public hearings that we did a couple of months ago were going to be bad, you ain't seen nothing yet. So I support this because, again, we have no other choice, and it's prudent and it's responsible, and this board has acted prudent and responsible, as audited year in, year out, and copies of which are available to the legislature. And I thank you for the opportunity to hear me out on it, Mr. Chairman.
Good venting. Susan?
This is more a clarification than anything, Gary. I, too, clearly understand the importance of the action that you're asking us to take. It allows us to get ahead of a deluge that we are seeing more and more clearly every month, and it would appear that others are missing the point. But your comments in response to our executive director's comment confused me, so I'm trying to clarify exactly what authorities we are giving you and what authorities we have before I make a vote on this. It's my understanding from what you said that we are changing only our process. We are not giving staff any authority to implement any budget item, be it a loan or an increase or anything, only a change in the timing of bringing the new budget to us so that we can get ahead.
Right. If I was
of the
unclear,
actions.
let me be precise. This is a process resolution. This is not substantive. So, for example, when
Okay.
we come to you proposing in May for your adoption in June, we will be asking you to authorize certain actions as well as staff to effectuate your decision-making. This is not that.
Now, I'm assuming that the process that you're implementing will meet all of our requirements for full disclosure, transparency, and appropriate notice time, and that you've considered that before we make this vote.
Yes,
And
this
I'm
is
also,
the minimum, but yes.
I'm also assuming that we have the authority to change this process. Your comments confused me as to whether we need approval from someone else in order to implement it.
You just confused me on to implement what?
Once we vote to change the process, is there any other approval or agreement that we need
No.
to do so?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
And we can always change it back.
And we can always change it back.
Correct.
Okay, everybody else needs a chance. Mitch?
I was going to follow up on Susan's point. Understanding the fact that we can do this on our own and then undo it if we find it is not being helpful. I think, however, and you mentioned it, that you had preliminary conversations with the Office of the State Controller, and I don't want to presume what the State Controller's office told you or did not tell you, but I think it would be very beneficial if we send a copy of this resolution to the State Controller and ask for his written response afterward before the May date, because I would be very interested in the position of the State Controller as to the effect not only on this or others. Now, understanding he does not have any authority over us, he is still the State Controller of the State of New York, and I would be very interested in his position on the matter. I am prepared to vote yes, notwithstanding, because I think this is important to at least start this process, because if we don't do it now and we do it next month, we lose another month. So I think it's important to do that, but I would be very interested in the position of the State Controller on the matter.
Let me just make a quick response. Again, we've had informal preliminary conversations with the State Controller about this. Subsequent to the Finance Committee, we formally advised the State Controller, pursuant to the regulations, that we have a material change in our financial condition.
Right.
And the only thing that I would say is that, first of all, they do have extant regulations which govern us.
Right.
And so we must maintain fidelity. We must maintain fidelity to those regulations, and we shall. And just lastly, I would say that we will continue our discussions with them. The idea of there being I understand the point about a written exchange to and from, and perhaps we should discuss that. I don't know that we need a board action to say that's how it is that we should.
No. I'm not.
Right.
I'm not indicating that. Obviously we can do it no matter what. But I think the impression is that, and you clearly gave it. Obviously, whatever action we take must be consistent with the rules and regulations of the controller, and his rules and regulations must be consistent with the statutes of the State of New York. We all understand the pyramid that goes. But I think the controller indicating in writing, this is a very dramatic and drastic change, and is not done lightly or liberally in that regard. And I think having the position of the State Controller either telling us, you're right, it is consistent, or it isn't, and here's why, to allow us to change whatever actions has to be taken. I think it's very important, not only for the perception of the action, but I think it's very important for the perception of the management and the statutes of the State of New York. And that's why I ask it. I don't think we have to do a board resolution to do it, but I would ask the chairman or the executive director to send the controller the resolution and tell him that we are doing this and we would like his position on the matter before the next board meeting. If he decides, he can decide to write a letter or not write a letter. That's the controller's response. But he is the chief financial officer of the state of New York, and I would like to know his position on the matter. And if somebody else doesn't want to do it, I can do it myself. But I just thought it would be better if it came from the board, from the officials themselves.
Yeah, we have no difficulty with doing that.
Fine.
Okay, anybody else before I call a vote?
Yes, I'd like to make some comments.
Go ahead.
To be clear, what I hear being said here is that obviously there's going to be another round of suggested cuts. I don't know that, as in pension smoothing, that it does us any good to smooth these out, or at least their financial impact or their financial repercussions over 18 months as opposed to a year. And I'm concerned that that consistent financial reporting might be lost in that process. Of course, if you don't lose it and you present both, then you get accused of presenting two sets of books again. But so I would advise against it for those reasons. The thing that is going to help the crisis that we're in is more money. So that means that we have to reopen the calls for the city to contribute to the operating expenses. After all, it's going to be residents mostly of the city who are imperiled by the booth closings and whose safety is going to be jeopardized when there is no one there to call 911. We need to ask for money from the federal government, whether it's in the form of stimulus, in the form of capital, and certainly in the form of operating money. And that should be a request that's done in a one-shot, and it should also be a large lobbying effort on the reauthorization of what is now being referred to as Safety Lou, the 5-year transportation reauthorization. And long-term, the debt service being paid out of the operating budget is problematic. It is what has brought us to this point. So that debt service should be looked at as part of the capital budget, and we should absolutely end the practice of sending any monies from the operating budget to the capital budget. Thank you.
Anybody else? Norman.
Just with Commissioner Palley's point, I think he's absolutely right that we send a letter to the state comptroller to get his opinion in writing on this particular piece of resolution that we're about to impose upon. But I think that it needs to be included in there that we as the board have the right to withdraw it whenever we feel and value the opinion of the state comptroller's office because we have a fiduciary responsibility. I think if those things are not in place, then I can't support it. But if they are in place, I can support it because I don't mean to be disrespectful in any way, but Gary and others that work here, they work for us. We're the board. We're the ones who supposed to set forth policy and procedures of how this is really governed. So if the commissioner wants that in there, I think that we should support that, put it in there, and with Commissioner Susan's position as to can we pull it out, in Jeff's position, we need to be able so that the public understands that this is not just going to be something that we agree upon today and then it goes under the carpet for next week and then they say, well, what happened? So if those things are willing to be put in there and we put it into the minutes right now and say that that's what's going to happen, then you have my support. If it's not going to go in there, then you know me, I'm the no guy. So, all right?
You're not always the no guy, Commissioner.
No, I voted for Rocco today.
There you go. The billionaire. Gary, do you have any difficulty in terms of just clarifying those specific points that Commissioner Metzger and Commissioner Seabrook have raised?
I think there's no difficulty in transmitting a letter to Controller DiNapoli and Deputy Controller Bleiwas on the issues, both the staff summary as well as a sense of the conversation of the board. If the notion is that your action is contingent upon some other action, in other words, a response. I would counsel you against that because that would not be the normal.
That was not my understanding of Commissioner Paley's or
Right.
Yeah, no, I think we're clear on that. I think that you just want assurance that we will take the vote here, but you just want, following that, just clarification that this is consistent with them. And obviously, if there's any difficulty, we'll come right back to you based on the conversations that Mr. DeLaverson has had with Ken Blewas, who I'm acquainted with as well, who's Tom DiNapoli's deputy. I anticipate no difficulty with that.
Okay, we all understand that. Anybody else? Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, I think that's unanimous.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Okay. We've now heard from MTA's Chief Financial Officer, who's running away, about the disturbing revenue trends that are causing the MTA's deficit to grow significantly in 2009 and 2010, despite the actions that the MTA has taken already to reduce expenses and raise revenues. We will now hear from Commissioner Frasco. On behalf of the working group of the board members, we have been reviewing potential ways to create internal savings to help fill the budget gaps the MTA faces. Doreen, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In light of what we learned on Monday at Finance Committee about continued deterioration in the economy and the impacts on our budget for the remainder of 2009 and 2010, the efforts of the small working group, which came together to find additional ways to realize savings agency-wide, has taken on even greater urgency. Members of the group include the chairman and Commissioners Brown, Kay, Saul, Sador, and Frasca. In May, we'll be back with what we had originally hoped to provide at this meeting, as we discovered our task was enormous and time-consuming. We met once a month in January and February, once or twice a month in January, February, and then weekly, as our schedules allowed, during April and March. We'll continue to meet weekly until the May Finance Committee and board meetings. However, at this point, we wanted to give everyone on the board a sense of the areas that we're examining and the methods and means of analyzing them more fully. There are 6 points, and I'll go through them as quickly as I can. First, we're carefully reviewing all initiatives that have been undertaken by the agency since 2005 with an eye towards suspending, curtailing, or eliminating those with no impact or a minimal impact on direct scheduled service to the public. Second, we're examining further reductions to administrative headcount in each agency beyond the substantial and painful reductions that each agency has already taken. Third, in our quest to maximize efficiency, we're considering broadening the consolidation efforts already begun within the authority and expanding them to interagency administrative functions. That's kind of vague. Let me try to be clear. The authority has already created the Business Service Center. We'd like to take that concept of consolidation and look at other places where we might do the same. And information technology is probably a worthwhile candidate for treatment like this, as well as looking at the administrative part of the railroads. Certainly Metro-North and LIRR have elements in common, and they also have radical differences. What we're looking at, and quite frankly what we're struggling with, are those areas of commonality that fall on the administrative side, not on the operating side. We haven't come to any conclusions. We'll be talking with Howard and Helena, as well as other experts, in order to ascertain whether in fact there are savings to be had from this exercise. Lee's engaged in the process with us. But in this perilous time for the MTA, it's incumbent on all of us to look every place we can to find savings and efficiencies. Fourth, we're looking at possible efficiencies to be gained where the MTA-CC and the capital construction functions of each agency, particularly transit, interact. Fifth, with the mushrooming of usage and costs associated with paratransit. We're seeking to find ways to run required services there in the most cost-effective fashion. And finally, we note that the Office of the State Deputy Comptroller is in the midst of conducting an audit of all of our real estate holdings. We'll review that audit on its completion. We'll be back to you in May.
I just want to say briefly, from a staff standpoint, we really want to acknowledge and appreciate the efforts of the board in this exercise. Clearly, we are in extraordinary times. The board has its responsibility to make sure that we have not left any stones unturned. And also, we view this as a natural process of the work that we've been doing in terms of just trying to save money and be as efficient as we can. So we think we've had a very good collaboration between the board and the staff, and we will continue to do this, particularly given the extraordinary times that we're in. This is something that you would probably want to do anyway, but particularly given where we're at, the need for it is even more incumbent upon us. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and Doreen, and Andrew, and Jeff, and Jim, and the others.
Thanks to everybody that's working on this. It's an acknowledgement that we can't just keep looking to fares and service cuts, that we really have to look very deeply within.
And I want to give my personal thanks to those in the working group who've really put an awful lot of time and effort in getting as far as we've gotten. We have learned an awful lot, I think, on the process, and we will get to some place, I think, which will amount to some significant savings to the MTA to ensure the public that we're doing everything we can internally to keep costs down and provide safe and efficient service on all our routes. So I thank you, Doreen, and Andrew, and Norman, and who am I forgetting? Jeff, and there's somebody else. Jim. And Jim. Jim, thank you for the time. It's been a lot of time, and it isn't over, and we thank you all of the rest of you for all the hours you all put in. I again say that the public has no idea how many hours all of you board members put in working to understand everything that you possibly can that goes on along here. There really are people, honest to God, who read through this on the board, every word, to make sure it's as right as it can be and send in corrections. It's unbelievable how many hours you all put in, and you have my enormous thanks and gratitude. And I'm only sorry that the public, particularly some of the people in this room and some of the legislators, don't know how hard you all work. So again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. Okay, now we get to the normal funding we have. So the first action items that we request the board ratification, the retention of the law firm Allen Kramer PC to provide legal services to the MTA and its operating agency. What I didn't do. Wait a minute. Yeah, oh, this is you? I'm sorry. I apologize. I got ahead of myself. Andrew, Finance Committee, you're on.
Okay, no comment on that, all right? Mr. Chairman, there are three action items. The first action requests board ratification of the retention of the law firm of Allen Kramer, PC, to provide legal services for the MTA and its operating agencies. Mr. Kramer was formerly with Brian Cave and provided service to the MTA as a member of that firm. This ratification has allowed Mr. Kramer to provide the same services, but as a solo practitioner. May we please have a vote on this item?
Second, all in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? So moved.
Okay, the second action item requests board approval of the annual investment report required by Section 2925 of the Public Authorities Law. A copy of this report was distributed separately to the board. May we have a vote on this item?
Motion. Second. All in favor? Aye. So moved.
Okay, the third item requests the board's approval of a resolution found on page 58B of the board materials, which allows the TBTA to accelerate the implementation of the new crossing charge schedule. This proposed change would result in the implementation of the new crossing charge schedule on June 28, 2009, which is approximately 2 weeks earlier than the date established by the board at its March 25 board meeting. May we have a vote on this item?
Motion.
Move it.
Second. All in favor? Anybody opposed? So moved.
There are no procurements this month. And, Mr. Chairman, that concludes the finance report.
Thank you, Andrew. And now we'd like a report on the Transit Committee. Doreen, please.
Good morning. On behalf of the Transit Committee, I present the following for the board's approval. There's one action item which requests board approval to modify the bus purchase element of the 2005-2009 capital program as described in the staff summary found on page 63 and 4 of the board materials. Can we have a vote on this?
Motion. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? So moved.
There are 16 New York City Transit procurements totaling $80,300,000. Of that number, 4 are non-competitive in the amount of $73,100,000. The committee recommends these, and I move them.
Second. Second. All in favor? Anybody opposed? So moved.
There are 4 competitive procurements in the amount of $100,000. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second. All in favor? Anybody opposed? So moved.
There are 8 ratifications in the amount of $7,070,000. The committee recommends them, and I move them.
Second, please. All in favor? Anybody opposed? So moved.
Mr. Chairman, regarding MTA Bus, there are no action items. There is 1 non-competitive procurement in the amount of $39,000. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Second, please. All in favor? Anybody opposed? So moved.
There are no competitive procurements, no ratifications, and this concludes the transit report.
Thank you very much, Doreen. Long Island Bus Committee, David Mack.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Long Island Railroad Committee met this month. Oh. And there is 1 action item. The action item requests the board approval to utilize $880,000 from the MTA Long Island Railroad 205 to 209 capital program for parking and state of good repair work at the Montauk Station. And it is more fully described on pages 97 and 99 of the board material. May I have a vote on this item?
Okay, second. All in favor? Anybody opposed? So moved.
Long Island Railroad has withdrawn the Nelson contract contained in the board material from the board's consideration today. No action on that. There are 2 non-competitive procurements as the green pages in the amount of $631,000. The committee recommends these procurements, and I like to move them.
Second, please. Second. All in favor? Anybody opposed? So moved.
There are no competitive. There are no competitive procurements in the yellow pages this month, and there are no ratifications in the pink pages. I'd like to go to Long Island Bus. There are no procurements this month, and that concludes Long Island Railroad and Long Island Bus Committee report. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Metro North Committee report is next. Jim Sidor.
Mr. Chairman, Metro North East of Hudson trains operated at 97.4% on time and on to March. I'd like to present the following items for the board's approval. There are 3 action items. The first action item requests board approval to enter into an operating agreement with the City of New York for the parking at the Yankees 153rd Street Station. The details of this proposal are found on page 115 and 116 of the board materials. I make a motion that we pass this.
Second, please. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Mark that one opposed, please. So moved.
The second action item requests board approval to expand the Connecticut Department of Transportation Uniticket program to cover the New Fairfield Southeast Shuttle, serving park and ride lots in New Fairfield and Brewster, connecting to Metro North Southeast Station on the Harlem Valley line, as more fully described on pages 117 and 118 of the board materials. I'd like to move this item.
Second, please. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? So moved.
The third action item requests board approval to enter into a contract with the New York State Department of Transportation to accept $10,500,000 in federal highway stimulus funding for the construction of the replacement of the South First Avenue Bridge in Mount Vernon, as more fully described on page 119 of the board materials. I'll move this item.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So moved.
There are 9 procurements totaling $110,699,651. Of that number, there are 2 non-competitive procurements in the amount of $240,000, and I'll move them.
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So moved.
There are 7 competitive procurements in the amount of $110,459,651. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So moved.
Mr. Chairman, there are no ratifications, and this concludes our report.
Thank you, Jim. David, we're back to you, B&T Committee.
Again, good morning, Mr. Chairman. Bridges and Tunnels Committee met this month. There are no action items. There are no competitive procurements in the green pages. There are 6 competitive procurements. There are no non-competitive procurements in the green pages. There are 6 competitive procurements in the yellow pages in the amount of $9,387,000. The committee recommends these procurements, and I'd like to move them.
Second, please. Second. All in favor? Anybody opposed? So moved.
There is 1 ratification in the pink pages in the amount of $335,000. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Second, please. Second. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? So moved.
Mr. Chairman, this concludes Bridges and Tunnels Committee report. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Now we move on to capital construction. Nancy, please.
Yes. I'd like to present the following for board's approval, and we'll vote on all of them at the end. 1 action item, which requests board authorization to enter into agreements with the owners of 300 Park Avenue and 437 Madison Avenue, and this is part of the East Side Access Project. There is 1 competitive procurement for the amount of $3,380,128. Lastly, there are 2 ratifications in the amount of $2,762,500. I recommend all of these and ask the board to vote on them.
Could I have a second, please?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Jeff? Okay, record Jeff is not opposed, but 1 opposed was still, it's moved, so moved. Nancy.
Regarding the real estate portion of the meeting, the committee reviewed and recommended a total of 14 real estate items for board approval. I move them.
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? So moved.
And lastly, at the committee meeting, I spoke in detail about what a pleasure it is working with Rocco, and I just wanted to conclude those remarks by saying that he is truly irreplaceable. Thank you, Rocco.
We all agree. Okay, at this time, I'd like to call for a motion to go into executive session for the board to conduct the executive session to discuss matters falling within the enumerated purposes of Section 105 of the Open Meetings Law, specifically matters pertaining to public safety, litigation, financial history, and dismissal or removal of a particular person or corporation. May I have a motion? May I have a second? All in favor? So moved. Let's go. We're going in executive session. Yeah, I am.
Time to set up when we come back. Hello, handsome.
If you could explain the vote that you all took on moving the dates of when you'll be considering the 2010 budget. I think it was Jeff Kay who said this is a bold move. Can you explain what makes it bold? Why is it significant, and why should the riders, and what this means eventually to the timetable for a fare hike, a second fare hike?
It reflects the magnitude, the challenge that we have in terms of dealing with the deficit that we reforecasted on Monday of $621 million for this year and $1 billion for next year. In order for us, without a rescue from Albany, to balance our books, we have to take significant additional budgetary action to get there, and we need to use 18 months. We essentially have to, if you will, if we don't get a rescue package from Albany, throw our budget out the window and ratchet it down and come up with a new budget that will enable us to deal with the significant deficit in 09 and 10. I'm not sure, Gary can speak to whether it's unprecedented or not, but in my years of public service, I'm not aware of any examples where this had to be done. It's very dramatic. It reflects the magnitude of what we are dealing with. Now, if these had occurred without the deficits that we reported before Monday, maybe it wouldn't have been necessary. But the cumulative effect of these deficits with the cliff that we are dealing with, the projected $6 billion over 4 years, whatever that total number is, the additive effect of the $620 million in 09, $1 billion in 10, on top of what we had reported, what we've been looking at before, that's what this reflects. Gary, would you like to? No. I think. Okay. Chairman?
Is that clear? I mean, we can make it clearer, but just think about, the way I think about it is if you got to get $100 out of the system, it's a lot easier to spread that $100 over 18 months than if you had to do it over 6 months. Think about it that way. We know what the problem is, so rather than having grab it all at once, we're trying to spread what we need to get over a longer period of time so the damage to the public, the amount of fare we have to increase is less. Just think about it that way. It's getting the same, since we know what the problem is, we're trying to spread the problem over a longer period of time so the pain is less. That's the easiest way to understand.
And we can't do it incrementally. The numbers are so significant that you can't just take an incremental adjustment here, a hiring freeze here, stopping a contract there. The numbers are so significant that requires really coming up with a new budget.
The paper that described this action mentioned that there may be the need for loans to cover the budget this year. I want you to explain that and where they would come from. And also, I want you to clarify this a little bit more. Why isn't this just a gimmick or sleight of hand or moving the goalposts? The MTA saying we can't match our budget to the calendar, so we're simply going to change the calendar to match our budget.
Gary, you want to speak to the cash management actions? And
Sure. Let me deal with your questions in sequence, I guess, right? So first, with respect to that portion of the staff summary that deals with cash. So MTA routinely, during the course of the year, right, borrows, quote-unquote, borrows money inside of accounts and moves money around to maintain cash flow. Why do we do that? We do that, obviously, because we have, week by week, day by day, expenses in the course of filling out an $11 billion budget. And so, for example, the state proceeds, taxes, typically don't arrive January, February, March, and April. We receive zero out of that $2 billion pot. We receive all $2 billion in the last portion of the year. So if you were a business, you would do cash flow loans in order to accomplish smoothing out, because your expenses are relatively stable in an organization like the MTA. So you do lots of what we call cash management. The staff summary references something in specific, which is as we get closer to the end of the year, and the board has taken the actions that are necessary in order to close the structural elements of the process, right? And this really gets to your second question of, why would one think of this as something other than a gimmick, which it clearly isn't. You have to take these dramatic structural actions in order to accomplish the solution to the $1 billion problem. That's the 2010 problem.
Basically, the 2010 problem, you aim at that and use 2009 to get at it,
right,
as much as you can.
Yeah, the easiest way to think about it is you're solving for X, and X in this case is $1 billion, and so that's what you have to accomplish in 2010. You're going to effectuate some of those actions dependent upon the board, the staff's recommendation.
That's the bigger problem. 10 is the bigger problem.
And the board's actions, and so you effectuate some of those in 2009, which reduces your $600 million which reduces our $600 million deficit in 2009. There may well be, in fact, almost perforce will be, a remaining deficit in 2009. That remaining deficit in 2009 will need to be satisfied. Why must it be satisfied? Again, back to your question about gimmickry and why it's not gimmickry. That must be satisfied because we continue to have a budget, right? We continue to have a fiscal year. We continue to have an obligation to make payments. We continue to have an obligation to make payroll, north of, $8 billion. So in order to do that, we have to continue to generate cash. So once you do on a budget basis, within the budget frame, solve the billion, see how much you've accomplished in the reduction of the $600 million in 2009, you may have a remainder. You almost certainly will have a remainder. Those actions will be then will be necessary to accomplish that. The first part of your question was what actions would those be? They could be a series of actions. For example, we could go to some of our funding partners and say perhaps you wish to advance us money that you would otherwise pay in 10 in 9. That could happen. There could be other actions that take place. I think it's totally premature to describe what those would be. We've talked about cash management in the past. I think we have a fairly sophisticated cash management actions that we do here, and I think when we get to that place, then we'll be able to describe them with precision because, again, we describe them with precision to the board.
And if I can Yeah, there's something to say just in terms of gimmickry. Just want to say we're a little sensitive about that, because there have been lots of assertions by some about, the MTA in terms of trust and books and so forth. And again, just want to restate, that we have strong feelings about that, our books are on our website. We have oversight from the Office of the State Controller. We're open to discussions about any further reporting. But I just want to make that point when you use the word gimmickry, that this is something that we are particularly sensitive to. As we stated in the board meeting, we've been discussing with the Office of the State Controller, who's the lead authority in this area, these actions as well. If you, again, we'll be speaking to all of that next month when we come back. We have not had discussions. Staff has not had discussions with the board to have a sense as to where we draw the line in terms of how much of this might be made up by fare and toll increases as compared to service impacts. If there's anything else administratively that we can do, and so that's the conversation for next month. So there is no strategy here, Willie, in regard to this. We're doing this to frame some timing for fares this year. No, that has not yet been part of the conversation.
A couple of things. First, the earlier cuts and fare hikes have been described, at least by some, as a doomsday scenario. If that was doomsday, what is this? And are you prepared to say now that anything is not on the table? For example, would you consider canceling some service overnights on subways as an example of something that would never have been considered before? And secondly, if you could just speak a little bit about the timing. If Albany were to come up with some money next week or the week after, is that enough to avert some of the pain? You've indicated before April was the deadline.
Okay, Tim, you asked me a couple of different questions, so if I don't catch all of them, let me know at the end. First, how would I characterize it? Having said that what we did before was doomsday, this is even worse. In terms of having taken one level of service reductions, obviously the next ones that we'll be looking at are that much more painful. And so, I'm not sure the English language captures what goes beyond doomsday, but to me, as a transit professional, as a citizen and a user of the system, they are just unbelievably difficult, and I think some would view them as horrific. So that's in terms of the nature, I think, of what we're looking at, and to the extent that it is then recommended, if we don't have a rescue from Albany, in terms of being done through fare increases, the idea of having fare increases above and beyond the 25 to 30% that we're now implementing certainly is not rational fare policy beyond the fact that we have to balance our budget. So that gives you a sense of how we view the next round that we will have to present in May in terms of the severity of what we're looking at. In terms of on the table, I think legitimately one can say that anything is off the table. Now, some of these ideas have been looked at in the past, and they have not found to be workable from a financial operational standpoint. In terms of overnight subway service, I have not had a real current discussion with Howard Roberts about that. I know in the past some of the reasons why that was dismissed in terms of the cost of closing stations and the commuting patterns of, as we've talked about, in the past, the person who lives in Brooklyn is a nurse working in the Bronx in a hospital, those kind of patterns. When you look at the life of New York, this is a 24/7 city. But again, we have not looked at it actively. That's what the next month is going to be about, and looking at those options. And it's going to be a very intense couple of weeks before the next board meeting where we present this. Then lastly, in terms of money from Albany, this is happening now. We sent the layoff notices yesterday. The Belmont service, that is getting cut on Friday. And so these actions are now going to be taking place. So it is imperative, that Albany come to the MTA's rescue to forestall these.
Can I just be clear? Are you ruling out the elimination of nighttime
As I said, I would not take anything off the table. Having said that, in regard to this specific proposal, there have been reasons historically, why that was not done. It may well be that those reasons still make sense, again, from a financial and operational standpoint.
Lee, the chairman started the meeting with a long discussion of how transparent and accountable the MTA has been. I was wondering, does that mean, does the MTA oppose the provisions in the Senate bill that would provide for a line item veto of items or components of the capital plan and require an audit by an independent auditor hired by the state comptroller?
As I think you've seen, we've been not looking to pick a fight with the Senate or the Assembly, and we appreciate the support of the governor and the mayor that we've had. In regard to the line item veto, as some of you know who follow this process, Matt, you were doing a piece on the capital program. The legislature already has the ability to veto the entire capital program through their capital program review board. This would enable them to, if you will, quote unquote, cherry pick specific projects they may not like. We have not gotten to those discussions. The Senate first introduced this bill. Now it's not yet being voted on. I think we're prepared to engage in discussions that have a rational, fair outcome. We appreciate the sensitivity that some legislators have expressed on this, and it's reflected in the bill. And my hope is that we could work through some of these items. I don't know if there's anything, Chair.
Lee, you mentioned at the very beginning of your remarks that this is, you were hoping Albany would come through and that this new budget gap is a result of the Albany not coming through. It was the public's understanding that the June State budget was kind of the scenario if Albany didn't come through. So are we now facing even more of a deficit? And furthermore, the mayor on Monday said that while he's calling upon Albany to come in and say to the MTA that if it doesn't happen this week, if it doesn't happen next week, and I'm going to tap off on Tim's question, is can it be reversed, and what are the costs, and what are the actions that will be associated with reversing a toll increase or reversing some of the things later on?
Yeah, Michael, again, on Monday we went over the reasons for the increase. It's not because Albany has not acted. It's because of the incredible reduction in real estate taxes and the reduction in ridership beyond what we had projected, and there was no criticism when we made those projections last year. They were accepted as being pretty solid, not conservative. It's just that I think no one anticipated this recession/depression that we're seeing. So that's not a function of Albany. Unfortunately, the other pieces to this in terms of the debt service that we have had and not having a stable revenue source, that is something that involves our partners in the state. So I want to be clear that the reason for the reforecasting on Monday, there is an element where the state has reduced its aid to us. That's also, again, caused by these recent developments with our economy. Then in regard to, how expensive will it be to reverse it? It'll be expensive, but it pales against the cost of them not taking any action. So I wish they would have acted before. They have said they would have acted by now. Is there an expense if they do take action in terms of how we would have to manage this as we, restarting the Belmont service and then the impact on our commuter rail customers? Yes, but we would deal with that. I don't have an exact number on that.
Can I just follow up quickly on that? Obviously, how would you go about rehiring workers, and particularly with regard to the station agents? The MTA sees something, say something, it's touching the public commentary. If there's nobody there to say something to you, who are you supposed to talk to?
Yeah, no, again, these are very, very painful reductions. The station agents is one particular issue, and we've had dialogue about that. We had a dialogue with the board and with the legislature and the SCARs, the customer service agents. A lot of these things we would prefer not to do. Station agents is a little more of a dialogue on that. But the bottom line is we don't want to be doing this.
this might be a question for Dale because I think he was a part of these talks. Doreen talked about as one of the measures being considered in kind of internal belt tightening is consolidating some of the administrative efforts at Long Island Railroad and Metro North. Can you talk about what that potentially could entail?
No. I mean, this is just one of the things we're examining, and as she said, we'll report back in May. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but we're looking at anything and everything, and so there's no answer to your question except that we're looking at it. There's nothing off the table. I think somebody brought it up. There is absolutely nothing off the table. Our job is to make MTA as lean and mean as we can and as efficient as we can. But after we get that far, then the only other two things we can do are service cuts and fare increases. Since we don't want to do that, we want to look at everything we can administratively to make MTA lean and mean. Or any organization can always do better. And if you think of the way the Japanese run their car companies, always trying to make it a little better every day, that's really what we're doing now. We're trying to make it a little better every day, a little bit faster.
If I could just add to what the chairman said again, there's no intent here to merge the Long Island Railroad and Metro North. That's something that we're not leaning, toward doing in any way, but to try and find where we can, as the chair say, administrative efficiencies. We found a lot so far. We put in a process with business services to begin marching toward that, and there's some specific functions as part of that evolution that we want to go at, and we need to go in tandem with the board because some of these rise to board level.
I know that you don't want to be pinned down in terms of when the next fare hike and service cuts would be, but isn't the point of the 18-month budget so that you could do it faster than if you did the budget in December? Because December, you have to have public hearings.
In some ways, Marcia, you're being more eloquent on that than I am.
No, but I mean, isn't
Yes,
that
and
the
that's
point?
part-
I mean,
that
the point
is-
is that you could do it faster
That
and
is
get more money into the system
That is
earlier?
one of the 3 or 4 main reasons to do it without question, to take that immediate action now, to throw the budget, to throw what we have out, to take these very strong actions immediately.
Senate Majority Leader Malcolm Smith is heading to Puerto Rico this weekend, and as some would describe, your system is crumbling and there's no solution. Any comment on his schedule?
As I said, and the chairman, you can also speak to this as well. We've tried to be very respectful of the process up in Albany. The governor has been representing us, pushing very hard for this with the Assembly and the Senate, trying to get there. So I know that when we had the event out on Friday with Senator Smith, he was hopeful of an outcome, and I just hope that they get there.